The first question we have for tonight was one that was asked in the context of uh, the subtleties of it, and that's one asked by Peter, and he said to me, he said, "So, what's wilting? How does wilting occur? Why does it occur? What are the mechanisms?" And that seems like a really easy, straightforward question. In fact, it's such a straightforward question. It was the topic of the dinner conversation at our table tonight, and in trying to figure out how that deals with it. And young Jessica, my youngest daughter, turned around and said, "Well, that's a silly."
I think it's a stupid question. I think it's a stupid question, Mark, and I know you like stupid questions.
Well, she said that was a silly question. She said, "I need a context," and she's absolutely right. And that's because wilting is a symptom, but it's a symptom of more than one thing. It's one of those horrible things that we deal with that aren't straightforward for us, and I wish they were, but they're not. So wilting in its simplest form of the thing that we probably most commonly talk about would be something like the loss of turgidity of something like impatiens on a hot summer's day, where the turgidity is the crispness or the tightness, the tautness of the cell wall around the cytosol is the inside, the fluidy bit, how taut that is. And during the day, when it loses water, that sac, so to speak, that canvas bag, gets a little bit wishy-washy. It's like, your air mattress going down. When your air mattress is really up hard, it doesn't feel anything. It goes down a bit and it becomes all wobbly, and that's what's happening. And that's just a reversible thing that is frequently reversed overnight. More water gets taken in, and the turgidity is restored in the cells. So that's very short term, and we would call that stress. It can go beyond that, though, and we see wilting as a really good diagnostic tool for lots of things. It's just a part of a lot of things. So you can have something that wilts because it's got too much water, and that sounds odd, but in part, water stops going in during those periods of soil saturation. To start off with, the membrane protein aquaporin, it's a gated protein, and it gates when the soil is saturated. So it locks up, so it makes it harder for water to get in. And then
Sorry, Mark, do you mean that the water doesn't go into the plant or the leaf?
Into the plants, all the water in the leaf, with a small portion exception. Almost all the water in the leaf comes in through the roots. It comes in through living cells. It crosses over a waterproof membrane, and then it's distributed to the vascular system, which is dead. Well, really incredibly obscure process. Live stuff get it in, go past the Casparian strip, that waterproof layer, and then because it's going through the inside of the cell, so it's going from cell to cell. Once it's transported to the other side of the Casparian strip, then the whole purpose of that water is to get rid of it and get it into vessels or tracheids or fiber tracheids and have it being moved up the plant. And if it can't move up the plant and water's coming out of the plant, even if it's just a small amount of photosynthesis, then things start to wilt. So you can get wilting and have moist soil, wet, saturated soils. It's a real common problem with hot plants, at least in my end of the world.
So sorry to interrupt again, Mark. But the plant knows when to turn the photosynthesis process on and off. If it's in danger of wilting, why wouldn't it just shut it down using the guard cells in the stomata to stop transpiration?
That's a great question. If you can find out an answer and get back to me, Um, because it's not something I assume that plants in the right spot deal with on a regular basis. That is, rainforest species have a whole pile of adaptations that allow them to deal with things. Riparian species have adaptations that allow them to deal with things. It's more problematic when you're putting a tree that's not used to those sort of environments, or a plant that's not used to those sort of environments, into that environment. So if you took Vietnamese mint, it likes being saturated. Put it at the edge of your pond and it's fine. That's going to do a very different job than if I were to put, I don't know, basil. Basil will die off in that. You've got to be aware that there are some adaptations. But the same question, Peter, and it's interesting because I've got a sample of it, is the locking up of the system and photosynthesis occurring in a sample of, now I'm going to go from memory, Podocarpus. And I prepared it when I was in the Czech Republic. It had a period of soil saturation, and the suction of the leaves, the negative pressure, the pull out of the gaseous material with water from the stomata was so great that the cells that were newly forming collapsed. Okay, so it actually caused the xylem tissue to flatten out, and same thing happens with frost. If you get a soil freeze after plant growth starts, so you're up towards the extremes of plant life, and your soil's thawed, and you think everything's going to go ahead, and then you get this very late freeze that refreezes the soil and freezes the roots down. You get exactly the same pattern occurring. And I can pull up some slides of that, but it's moderately complex in terms of the mechanisms, but the cells collapse. The suction is that great that young cells aren't strong enough, aren't woody enough to support it, and they push downwards. Peter, if you remind me, I'll pull up a picture and we'll show it at the next ArborMentor. I'll try and.
And would that constitute wilting?
That creates wilting, yes. In that case, to get water, it literally flattens out cells. It sucks that hard. And I guess that's like, if we were sucking through.
It would seem that there are a number of causes of wilting.
Oh, lots of causes of wilting. Lack of water, the most obvious one. When there's insufficient soil moisture, even though there's moisture in the soil, we get to the wilt point, and that's why it's called the wilt point. It's where the cohesive nature of the soil, the attraction of water to the soil particles, is greater than the capacity of the plant to take out. So we end up with a plant that wilts. And so that can be a problem. The other wilt that can occur are vascular wilts. That's when something gets in and the tree says, well, I don't want you into the plant. I've got to stop you from getting through the plant. And it blocks off the tubes, uses one of two primary mechanisms. One's tylosis, another one's gummosis. It blocks those little tubes up. And of course, in doing so, water can't get up to the end. And so you get the tip's end. And if you're in Australia, you see that with Botrytis and claridash, really common. As claridash get older, they get a Botrytis infection, and you'll see the tips start to die back. The tree kills that top portion, complete with the fungus, and it starts again. And if it's got a good, healthy root system and it's in a relatively good environment, it'll start all over again. And vascular wilts are fairly common for us. A number of them are really quite problematic. Dutch elm's disease is a good example of a vascular wilt, spread by a beetle, and that causes the vessels to block up, and of course the elms don't come back from that. So, and we do have a number of things that fit into that category here in Australia. So those are some of the examples where you can get wilting. When you get wilting, and you'll often see this usually followed by death, but not always, with lightning strike, where lightning damages the absorbing roots. So one of the things you need to do after a tree's been hit by lightning is to add water and make sure that the soil moisture levels are at that Goldilocks zone. And we'll talk about that forever. And there's no perfect answer for what the Goldilocks zone is. It's going to vary from plant to plant in terms of species to species and even cultivar to cultivar. So it's very hard to get that one right. So any more questions on that one, Peter?
Thanks, Mark. There's
So,
lots of other things that you could talk about, but I think that's comprehensively covered it.
so if you see, we've got a water movement problem. It's either water movement through the stems, fungal issues, or we've got something that's preventing the water getting in. That is, the roots are dysfunctional for some reason. So even Phytophthora will, in its early stages, often give you the sign that the plant's starting to wilt because it's affecting the small absorbing roots. No absorbing roots. So let me define my terms. Absorbing roots are small little roots at the end of the root system that have root hairs. Let me see if I can pull up one. They're now defined in the Australian Standard for Protection of Trees and Development Sites. But whether I'll have a picture that I can pull quickly, I can't promise, because it's just seeing roots. And one of the big problems that I had as a young arborist, and I suspect many arborists do, is having troubles picking the differences between the different types of roots. And I remember distinctly being in Boone with Alex Shigo and talking about the absorbing roots, and he let me know in no uncompromising terms that they weren't absorbing roots, they were woody roots. And okay, theoretically, this could be an absorbing root, except it's not. It's matured. It's got all these little root hairs, and typically they're less than about a millimetre and a half in diameter. If you can take the bark off, what we've done here, take the bark off, that's a woody root. And they go from about a millimetre up. So you get a crossover zone there. In fact, absorbing roots are often bigger than woody roots, and that's because they've got a sponge around the outside of them. And that sponge is slothed off, and over time, organisms come in and eat it away. It's just dead tissue on the outside eventually. It's live whilst it's young. Usually it doesn't last for more than a few weeks. So hopefully that makes that a little clearer. I'll just see if I can find I've got to do it in this platform because I'm not on the major computer.
It would be great if you could show us an image of an absorbing root.
Well, here's an absorbing root on grass, and people say to me, well, look, hang on a second, Mark. Grass is not like trees, and the answer is yes, it is. It's amazingly like trees, just doesn't get as woody. And I'm going to zoom in on this because this is a really great little one, this one. You can see the root hairs coming off the side. This is in a trench when they were putting in NDN. And this is 1.5 meters down. 1.5 meters. Now, we think about tree roots. We don't think about grass roots at 1.5 meters, but that's grass root. And it's clearly an absorbing root. This above it doesn't have the root hairs on it yet. It's just starting to come out. That's a pioneer root. Pioneer roots mature into absorbing roots. A little bit of a pioneer tip on here, but not much. And this will typically last just a few weeks. So I'm not a specialist. Sorry, it wasn't. It was electrical upgrade.
Would that be visible to the naked eye, or are you
That one was visible to the naked eye,
dealing with
so I was able to see that one. But oftentimes, absorbing roots aren't readily visible once you get over about the age of 40 to the human eye, or a person that doesn't have really good 20/20 vision. And that's just the way it goes. Wish that it were easier, but it's not. I know another spot I can do it. Well, yeah, no, I'm not going to open multiple pages. So, yeah,
Excuse,
if
Mark.
that absorbing root system is damaged um, from any one of a dozen different things and diseases that are biotic. So,
hang
things.
on, Mark? Hang on, Mark. There's been a interruption from the floor. Is that you, Michael?
Yeah, sorry, Mark. On that grass root, it looked like a very healthy root, but I didn't see any mycorrhiza. Does grass have a mycorrhizal association?
Yeah, grasses do develop a mycorrhizal association, but here's the kicker on it, Michael. They develop a buscular mycorrhizal system in general, monocots. And in fact, most the small VAM type or the internal ones that go internal, so they're nowhere near as obvious. And I remember a funny discussion about this during the Olympics in Sydney, just before the Olympics. Some of the transplanted figs weren't going so well, and one of the plant pathologists that were looking at it said, "Well, I don't see any mycorrhizal fungi," and we had a big laugh about it and said, "Well, that's because it's one of the internal ones. You won't see it. You have to go through and stain for it. It's a horrible process." Fortunately, a number of tree species have mycorrhizal associations that are external. So those that are on the outside of the roots, a lot easier to see. And I can show you one of those, I'm pretty sure. Mycorrhizae, I think.
So what did you say that grass root had? Buscular.
Yeah, vesicular buscular mycorrhiza, or mycorrhizae inside the leaf rather than outside the leaf, the root, sorry. So on a mycorrhizal fungus, I'm just trying to get past puffballs. Okay, it's slightly out of focus. I apologize. But the actual root portion of this is only 20% of the thickness. The rest is a thing called a Hartig net. And that's what makes it really easy to see mycorrhizal fungi, is the Hartig net. But you don't get any of that on. I can do it this way.
So that mycorrhiza that invades the root doesn't necessarily increases the root's volume in the soil.
Yeah, no, depending, and that's a great question. It depends on how it works and where it works. So
So how does it help the plant uptake?
okay, good question. Great question. This is what our endomycorrhiza, endo meaning inside, and you see it's got a buscules, or these big sort of noduly components inside the cell. So these guys don't go very far out. They're close by, but they have a whole pile of chemistry that plants don't have. So fungi don't have. They're not autotrophs. They're not self-feeding. They're heterotrophs. They get the food from somewhere else. And mycorrhizae get their food from plants, and their ability to interact with their environment is different as well. So that, for example, they can do things like take phosphorus. Phosphorus is bound. Australian soils are low in phosphorus, and that's great. And they get in an association with, say, a eucalyptus, and the soil's low in phosphorus. That's okay. Plants need phosphorus. For example, the key energy source, adenosine triphosphate, 3 phosphate molecules. How are we going to get those? Well, we take phosphorus and we cause a chemical reaction to occur, an enzymatic reaction, and we turn phosphate into a phosphate, and phosphate's really mobile. And so the fungus can take up phosphorus, give it to the plant, and in exchange the plant gives food. Okay, so ectomycorrhizae, the ones on the outside, they're slightly different, and endecto we'll just put in the same category, but it's not the one I want. This picture here, if I can get it to zoom into it, maybe it won't. Yeah, here's the roots here. This is on a pinus. I think this is a shot by Sally Smith. And here's the hyphal strands or mycelium strands. Hyphae is smaller than that, you can't see it. And so it's increased the area markedly. And that's why things like oaks and eucalypts really like that sort of association, but it varies from plant to plant. Most plants are mycorrhizas. Some of the exceptions: Ericaceae tend not to. Proteaceae, and that's a problem for Proteaceae, because if we put a lot of phosphorus down now, some superphosphate, and we fertilized the paddock where this young eucalyptus seedlings, pine seedlings growing, sorry, it's pinus, it would take that and fertilize it. The phosphorus is not regulated well through the mycorrhizae and would kill the mycorrhizae. At the end of it would drop the population right back. So that's a real problem. Phosphates, and we used to do that. We used to put phosphates all over the place. And in doing so, we got rid of the fungus, and then we had to put phosphates on to take up the role of the fungus that had been destroyed by putting on the phosphates. It takes a while for that system to come back into balance, and it does. And almost nobody uses superphosphates now. Proteaceae, things like grevillea, if we put a high phosphorus fertilizer down, we kill them because they don't regulate it. They've got a low regulation for uptake. And they do the job here of the mycorrhizae. Mycorrhizae is not taking it up on Proteaceae. Most Proteaceae won't develop a mycorrhizal association. Does that make any sense for you, Mick? Hello?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah, I just thought I'd just disconnected. So, yeah, mycorrhizae is good stuff. Mycorrhizae can increase the efficiency of a root system significantly. So this is Sally Smith's shot here. Let me see if this will open up for us.
So to summarize the internal one, the arbuscular one, that's just main function is to create turn phosphor into phosphate, or
it's got lots of roles. It's also good in protection. So, for example, we know that trees with a good ectomycorrhizal, even a good vesicular arbuscular mycorrhizae or endomycorrhizae, they're really good at defending against things like Phytophthora. So we have lots of things that the fungus do in exchange for their food. They're useful. They can take up water. They can take up solutes. So they effectively stop this particular type, the ectomycorrhizae, stop the roots from growing as much. They slow down. They let us do that bit. You give us food, and we'll take care of a whole part of the roots function for you. So they tend to bifurcate and shorten, and you saw that with the that image that's out of focus. There's a focus one, but I have no idea where it is. But that earlier one of the mycorrhizae shot is from an oak at the University of Sydney. And that's just purely a massive hyphae. And that's, as I said, probably 20% of the volume there is the root on the inside, and all the rest is just a massive fungi around the outside. And if, for example, comes along here, the fungus is going to have a warfare. It does not want its host. It'd be like, Mick, if I were to give you $10 every day, and you found Peter harassing me, we might want to say to Peter, hey, Peter, stop harassing up. Well, that's essentially happening here. These guys are dependent on the tree for their survival. And that's one of the problems with inoculating. You can buy inoculum, but inoculum has been fairly unsuccessful. There are some situations where it is really successful. Things like mass site destruction and rehabilitation. So when they cut and scrape and destroy the site, and most sites, the guys that are the not so spreading ones, they're brought in things like say Glomulaceae. They're brought in on grassroots, and of course now that we take less and less of the grass when we grow turf, we get even less and less of it coming in. So there are places where it takes a number of years for the soil to improve. How could you improve it? I know one way of improving it for the ectomycorrhizae, the guys on the outside. Has anyone got any idea what that might be?
Mulch.
Mulch, yeah. Mulch is good. What happens is, and I'll show you, I did have one. Some of the puffballs are mycorrhizal, this particular one. And a raindrop will land on it, make it go puff. It'll expand. It'll do it at night. It's got brown spores, so it's somewhat light resistant. Sunlight doesn't necessarily cook it straight away. It'll move around, land in the rain on some mulch, get washed down into the mulch. Now we've got no risk of UV. It germinates, the spore germinates, and it starts the whole process going. It grows towards a root. The root looks at that biochemically and says, "Who are you?" And all the bad jokes about it. It says, I'm Mike O'Reilly. And sure enough, the two start to get closer and closer until they form this really strong codependency. And some plants, like pinus, for example, are essentially obligatory symbiotes. They have to be in a mycorrhizal association. When we first brought pinus to Australia for forestry, we had problems because we didn't have fungi that were well selected for them, so they didn't grow particularly well at all. So we had to bring them in, and guess what we brought in? Amanita. And so we brought in, amongst other things, the death cap fungi, which has been in the news for the last couple of months. And that's a mycorrhizal fungi that's associated with pinus. So if you're really thinking about eating a mushroom and it's underneath a pine, make sure you have, you'll get it under oaks as well. So just be cautious with fungi that you're not sure on.
Be careful where you put your dehumidifier, you reckon?
Yeah, and definitely don't put it into a beef Wellington. Do not. Look, I'm not going to go into the rights or wrongs of that case, but again, it's just fascinating. There are lots of plant toxins, and
Mike, I've just sent you an email from Darren Brooks. If you can check for me, please.
Can
this might be out.
It nearly relates to
this might be outside of our current session, but
I just
up to you.
I've done a job I've done a job for an impact assessment report, and I just sent it to Pete because I didn't have your email address, but whatever. But I'll get that off you at some stage. If you can just go down to page.
It's fine for you to send it to me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't have a problem either way, but I just want to take 5 seconds of your time. If you go down to page 13 of that report, I went to look at this job. They're going to put it in a shed and whatever. So impact assessment. The trees are busted, full of bloody bracket fungus and whatever. But I actually found a piece, and I just went down to my box downstairs. I thought I'd put it in my box downstairs, a piece that So there, you could tell where there was a piece of bracket fungus on the tree that is actually, it's failed itself. The bracket fungus has fallen off the tree itself, and I found it on the ground when I was there, and I just never seen it before. Like
I can.
I normally still find them attached to trees and whatever.
Yep. So
I didn't know whether you'd come up with that's a proper thing, or I'm saying things, or what.
no, it's hard to say from just a few photos, but let's go the other side there, and I'll add that really easily. We see bracket fungus as the big, horrible, bad boogeyman, or used to do. Less so nowadays, and hopefully it'll be even less in time. I've got pictures of beautiful, big, healthy sporocarps, fruiting bodies of Phylinus, where the fungus has been killed by other fungi, what we call mycophagous fungi. So it's not uncommon, but it's not common. So it occurs where the fungus is killed, and that's the end of it. And oftentimes the environment's changed by things like cockatoos that start to pull out decayed material and those sort of things. But based on photographing, guys, you can't see it. And I'm not going to try and swap and share at this stage, but it's definitely a musty browny colour onto the underside, quite high compared with width, so more than half the width high. It's a sporocarp, so it really does look like it's a Phylinus. So I think that's correct. And I can show you where they almost do the job completely just from this week's photos. And I should be able to go back to all my photos. Where is it now? Yeah, do you want to go down that quickly? I don't want to go that quick either. Down, down, down. Yep, there we are. Come on. No, wouldn't be cute. You want to go there. I want to hit the screen, but not go into it. There we are. That's it. Here's a sporocarp on a very small opening. And I just happened to catch it. I'm not concerned about it. But you can see the size of the injury on the tree is almost nothing. If that fungus, this is Phylinus again, if that fungus is not virulent, if its genetics aren't as good as the tree that it's on, which I think is a Botrytis, then this will completely occlude over and it'll create an environment where the fungus may be growing there, but it'll be significantly reduced just because it's more problems getting oxygen and getting dry. So we need two things. We need air and we need dry. We need to get rid of some of the water. And that's how trees stop the fungi. And this is the works now. I'm wrong, and Dr. Lynn Bodie wants to beat me up. I'm sure it's Dr. Bodie, but it might be Professor Lynn Bodie. But either of the two, some great work by her on endobionts. Endo meaning in again, bionts, living things that are growing inside. And a lot of our fungi, like Phylinus and Ganoderma, are fungi that are already there waiting for something to happen. They're not just magically randomly started. They're pre-existing in the wood of the plant material.
Going back to what I'd sort of sent you, it was just really weird. So it had large brackets throughout the entire canopy type thing. And some of them, they looked like they were dripping, yeah? But this one that was on the ground, it was fully dead. I don't know how long. I know I asked the guy, and the backyard was overgrown and full of dog do and what, a whole heap of stuff, yeah? But I I sort of said to him, have you ever noticed anything dropping out of the tree? And like there'd been a couple of major branch failures and whatnot. But this here, I'd never seen a bracket drop off before.
Yeah.
Is it common or not?
They do. It's not frequent, but it occurs, yes. And
Is it like the backyard's fully saturated? Like there's no drainage, there's no nothing, yeah. And obviously wet feet. There's just a multitude of things going on with the backyard itself. But question, well, just never seen a bracket drop off before. You see them dead in trees. Don't get me wrong. Once
the answer is
useful life expectancy.
they do drop off, Sharon, and they do have cockatoos will pull them off.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, birds.
Whereas this sort, I had it up here a little earlier. Let me. This sort here, this is ephemeral. So
yeah.
Okay, and these drop off all the time. You know, they usually don't last 3 to 6 months on the tree, then they're knocked off.
Wow.
And they start off, they're quite heavy. They absolutely sopping wet with water. The reason they're sopping wet with water is they're sucking water out of the wood so that the fungus can grow more. If it can suck water away, it can't grow in saturated conditions. So this is a little trick that they use to make the environment the way they like. And you'll see the same thing even on the bottom of Phillinus when it's at that stage of putting on a new layer that's really quite moist material, and it's trying to get rid of, again, some more of the water from the inside. This one in particular is, you'll see, damaging the inside, whereas this one, this is an ear fungus, auricula, or jelly fungus. It's edible, used quite commonly in Asian cooking, and that's on stuff that's already dead or is about to die. You know, there's no chance of it surviving, and so this fungus is just first dibs, and it's probably one of those fungus again that's already in the tree. Yeah, it's perfectly healthy. So it's a complex relationship, and you know, if you say, well, what's definitely going to kill trees? There's a couple of primary pathogens, but beyond that, I'm sick to death of saying, look, I think the tree is going to die, and go back looking back at the tree 2 or 3 or 4 years later and saying, okay, it's okay. And, you know, we're not good at that sort of prediction. That's one of the problems that we as a profession have when we start using things like useful life expectancy. And even worse, safe useful life expectancy. You know, things change and they're more complex than I can deal with. You know, I just can't predict it. And hopefully you've all had that experience by now already, but if you haven't, you definitely will eventually have it, where you think, oh, that tree is dead. And in fact, I did one the other day. 2 years ago, I said the tree is dying, plan for its removal. And this year I said, the tree seems to be recovering. I just give up. And again, I can show you a photograph of that just from the last week of looking at trees. So I'll do that for you. If I can get this right again, tip up the top. Now come down. The tree here, I don't know what happened to it. That half completely denuded of foliage, same with one little bit out the back. This side's all got normal foliage. And if I would look at this tree a month ago, it would have had no leaves on that half, and all brown leaves, you know, marquescent leaves. It's shooting back like crazy. I've got no idea. I just put my hands up and say, let's just watch and observe. And I think that's something that we have to accept as arborists, that, you know, the process of diagnosis is not always going to be straightforward, simple and easy. If it's hard for people, it's a lot harder for plants. Plants are a lot more chemically complex than human beings. hard to believe that, but it's the fact. So does that answer that question for you, Darren?
Yeah, mate. All good. All good.
Yes, they do drop.
All good.
I'd probably have half a dozen shots of them in my collection, including one I said that was just obviously doing root borer, and then a mycophagous fungi had come along and just hammered the hell out of it and take it over. And that does happen. That's why you get cavities that don't keep on going ad infinitum and the tree falling over. Not saying you can't, it's just that often you don't. So,
Yeah, definitely.
any
But
other?
you see some there the size of a dinner plate, and you see other. Then there's nothing. It doesn't appear nothing wrong with the tree, and then these ones are all like I suppose a Coke can size. You know what I mean? But multiple throughout, full entire canopy, and you think there's something wrong here, but and proper some good branch values in the neighbouring yards and whatnot, and
Would it have been the canopy or the crown, Darren?
Oh, that's a good.
So pretty well first order branches. Look, I would dare say, and you
I
know
think that's
what?
a different
So
question.
in the street itself,
Can I ask
there's
Mark
sort
to
of
explain? Can I ask Mark to explain the difference between a crown and a canopy, please?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's one that I've got a young trainee on at the moment, and he gave me a photograph of a tree and said there's the crown is dead, and he was talking about the upper crown, the lower crown was live, and we talked about the specificity of language, and crown and canopy is one of those things. This here, all the way across the image, is the canopy. Okay, the crown is the whole foliage area of the tree, and the reason that's the case is because that's the way the Australian standard defines it. That's often the way it's talked about in forestry terms. So I think it's great for to adopt language where it's appropriate. So I understand what Darren's saying is there were fruiting bodies in places like here and here. I don't know whether you can see my mouse there. It's not a good pointer on this. Let me see. Can I? No, I can't. I must be able to make that bigger. No, hang on. I know why you can't see it. Yeah. So okay. You're talking about you're having fruiting bodies here and here and here. It's had injuries, Darren, and injuries where a fungus has come. I'm
definitely
grower.
even lower.
Yeah.
Even lower first order attachments. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Look,
Probably.
why does it happen and why doesn't it happen in other spots? I have no idea. It's just the luck of the Irish, I guess. Some get going really quickly, some don't. There are a whole pile of different fungi that do different jobs, and realistically, we should be welcoming seeing Phalaenus in trees in general rather than being concerned about it. But yeah, it can be a problem on rare occasions. So generally, if it's got Phalaenus, I just walk past, ignore it. Actually, I don't record it. And I record it so that I can see it and look at it in future. And I guess of the 1,000-odd cavities I look after at the moment, I had one bale in 3 years. So that's 1 in 3,000 failure rate. And it did probably the better part of $120 worth of damage. So if you look at from that point of view, it's hard to get really concerned about cavities and decay of that nature. The stuff that's up here, Darren, the stuff that's near the ground, Ganoderma, butt rots, I always have more concerns about, or Phalaenus noxious, which is no longer Phalaenus noxious. I think you guys know what I mean. I'll just see if I can pull up a Ganoderma. Ganoderma. So it's a little difficult not being on Yeah, so that's some Ganoderma there. That's a Ganoderma there. That's not Ganoderma. That looks like Ganoderma. Yep. So Ganoderma is a butt rot, and because it's down near the base of the tree, it's more problematic for us. That's not Ganoderma. It's interesting. It's tried to interpret that, and that's Felinus. And so perfectly okay me in my thinking to see that. Okay, so any other questions on anything today? We're getting close to finishing it.
Thanks, Mark.
Any questions from the floor?
How about Omphallotus? Is that a destructive fungi? Is that something I need to keep an eye out?
Mick, it was Mick, was it, that asked that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know, Mick.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have supplied a photo. I've got one that we removed the river red gum, about 30 centimeters diameter, and had a lot of fruiting bodies attached to the base of the stump. But when we made the final cut, so within 5 centimeters of where the fruiting bodies were, there wasn't actually any invasion into the cut stump. So
Yeah,
if
look,
I'd inspected the tree, I might have had more concerns about it than what was actually borne out.
yeah, gut level guess is it's probably not a problem in most cases. But there's so much about mycology I don't know. I'm struggling with arboriculture. So when we get to fungi, it starts to become really, really difficult. The only advantage I've got over you is I've got an extra 20 odd years and sitting in a few more lectures. Other than that, I struggle with the same issues and the same questions. So what I do know is we're constantly finding more and more things that are problematic. So there's a new fungus of palm, for example, that was found at Cairns Botanic Gardens. That's a primary pathogen. We're going to get more of these primary pathogens, I suspect, and we're also going to get more diseases. And I just had up earlier on there, it probably wasn't so obvious, but I just had some shot hole borer from your end of the world, Mick. I feel sorry for anyone that's living in Western Australia. People say it's a lovely place to live, but you can't have trees because there's a reasonable chance that things are going to start to disappear. That doesn't look too nice, does it?
Yeah. Where I am in the foothills, I haven't seen a lot of it. It's only when I go down to the flats that I see it.
Yeah, it's just waiting for someone to package it up and send it to the East Coast.
It's inevitable.
Yeah, and it's a shame because it is inevitable, and it'll get into New South Wales first. Victoria will keep it out because they're smart. Queensland has to be stoned and trying to figure out what it is. But yeah, we'll just welcome it in when it comes. We've been very ineffective at trying to stop these things, and I really don't think there's much benefit in trying as you found out in Western Australia. If you can get it very early on, great, but no one's going to see it. It'll go missed and undiagnosed. It'll be a problem that's irreversible by the time we notice it. The same with us for myrtle rust. Myrtle rust came in and it just spread so rapidly we just couldn't control it. So just a matter of time.
Mm.
And I really think we've dodged the bullet with a whole pile of other things that are likewise problematic.
Mm.
Any other questions?
Well, thanks very much, Mark. Peter.
My pleasure, guys. Look, if there's something you want to know for next one, send it off to Peter, and we'll happily go over it. I may well pull up another report at the next one and have a look at some of the bits and pieces in that as well, particularly in light of the the new Australian standard, and just looking at how we adapt that. It's there are some things there that some of you may not be ready for, and some quicker, easy workarounds in dealing with them, like putting dimensions on plans rather than having to necessarily have everything done with CAD. If you're not CAD friendly, who is CAD friendly? I know Vicky is. Peter is, or equivalent. Yeah. So, okay, if you're not CAD friendly, broad cultural impact assessment reports, it's not a shall, but it's a should. And so there's a few little workarounds there for you to work with. So we'll see you next ArborMentor. Peter will give you a little bit more notice next time. Thanks, guys.
Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Mark and
Thanks
Peter.
all.
Thank
Have
you.
a great night.